I make a lot of content about branding, about marketing, about design, about creative direction. When you start off, I think it's really hard for people not to stay consistent if they don't go every day. But if it's like a habit where every day you're working on it and you're publishing every day and you have to do it, those are the people that succeed.
Today on deepfeed, I chat with Oren John, an LA-based creative director, marketing expert, and creator. Oren has an impressive resume spanning numerous projects where he worked as a partner, executive, and advisor, utilizing his expertise in brand strategy and product development. In this episode, we discuss his approach to social media strategy and content creation, how to craft a personal brand, how to launch a product business, and much more. Let's get into it. Hi, Oren. Welcome to deepfeed.
All right. Hey, excited to be here and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, so can you share your journey from even back to when you started as a graphic designer in New York City to where you are now?
Yeah, perfect. I'd love to. So, I went to school for design in Arizona. I actually was in a band shortly after college, which kind of delayed my career by a few years. But as that wound down, I ended up moving to New York and worked as a designer. First in hospitality, like a hospitality group that owned like nightclubs and restaurants. And then eventually at a small agency. And then things kind of, I guess, got more interesting from there. So I started in design. I became a creative director at that agency I was working at. And this was really the time when like social media advertising and Google advertising was first kind of getting its popularity. So this is maybe 15 plus years ago. And so I had the ability to start testing things like Facebook ads with inside this agency. No one else knew how to do it or wanted to know how to do it. And I kind of jumped on those things early and helped me transition to eventually being a creative director and then shifting over into technology to become, I was a marketing director at a outdoors technology company and then moved into consumer electronics. And then through a number of different businesses, quite a few, I won't go through the whole history, to where we are today. Where about 2 years ago, I was getting out of a really exhausting business I had worked on where we had gone from kind of nothing to being acquired by a public company in about 2.5 years. And I had been very operational in that business. I was the president of that business. And I was like, I want to get back into marketing and design. I was done being, really, really deep in operations there. And I said, I need to create content and learn how that works. Started as a content creator, and that's gotten really popular. And now I get to have a much more interesting creative life, which is really exciting, and get to meet people like you and see where it takes me.
Yeah, I think I've heard you say before that it took many posts before you popped off, maybe even like 100 or more. And that's typical that it does. There is a journey there. How did you stay motivated and consistent when you weren't necessarily seeing the results when you doubled down as a content creator?
It was interesting because like you see small results, right? You see like incremental improvement. And so I had gone through a couple ideas, right? And I kind of knew that, no matter what, like it's about ideas that resonate. And so first I started making short form videos about non-alcoholic beverages because I didn't drink at the time. I was like, that's not quite right. And I started making it about like CPG products. And that wasn't quite right. But then when I started doing it a little bit more about, marketing and product development, I could kind of see immediately that there was something there. Like videos that once got a couple hundred views would get like maybe 800 or 1,000. And then, every 1 in 6 or 7 would start to get more. And she's like, okay, you can see that there's a there. And then as soon as you get your first one that actually goes, and for me, again, that was probably like 60 or 100 videos in, like then you're hooked, right? And if you can reproduce that, if you can keep working through it, then, it's addicting, right? It's a dopamine rush in its own way. And then as soon as you start to tie that to like to career incentives and to the monetary incentives that come with it, all of a sudden, you really get into a system where like it's just so much more a beneficial use of time than so many other things you'd typically be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I am curious though, when you left, being a president of a company and then you went in on content, what were you trying to achieve there by that shift?
Yeah. And so I guess I wanted to move back. Like I was basically like, hey, I'm not going to be operational anymore. I'm going to go back to being like a VP of marketing or a CMO. And I ended up actually becoming a CMO of a company relatively quick while I was also making content. But I just realized that like, I just didn't understand it. Like the last time I had been in a VP marketing role was really deep in the Facebook ads era. And I understood that like, well, like I can still go in and spend a lot of time inside Meta, understand the different campaigns work on, like how we do targeting, how ASC functions, how you get ROAS, how you build out, a scaling business that way. But it seemed like it was no longer an advantage, right? Everyone was struggling there. That's very commodified. But organic content was like how brands were blowing up. And I was like, if I don't understand that, at least to the point where I can manage it, then like what am I going to do inside those marketing roles? I think that's a big thing for a lot of people to think about, right? Like you don't have to be an expert in something, but you should understand it well enough to manage it. Like I'm not an engineer, but I spent enough time coding and working with engineers and working on those projects to have a rough idea of how long things take, what a real objection is, like what actual things people deal with, what's the difference between a junior and a senior role. And as a marketing executive, if you don't understand that about organic social, then how are you supposed to manage those teams? And so I think that's a big shift that like we're still in the middle of.
Okay, so after you really figured out your niche, what do you think attributed to making your content so successful?
Yeah, I think really it came down to formats that people were able to, digest and get excited about who weren't, just B2B, right? So I make, those that don't know, I make a lot of content about branding, about marketing, about design, about creative direction. And I had made some good content that was like specifically like tools and enablement, and here's how you do it, like the more educational. But the stuff that really does well is more universally appealing. And so I've been doing okay, but I got a management firm, and my manager had been really throwing out more series and concept ideas, and he had come up with this idea of like for like the product versus brand series we ended up doing, which is one of the things that really like helped get me a lot of followers, like escalate my brand a decent amount, as well as we'd had a previous series before that was like about status products and companies, and really like series like that where if you're a consumer you can go in there and be like interested in learning more about your favorite products and why they resonate, or sharing an opinion on them, or if you should buy them or not, while also having marketers and branding people gain some value professionally, was like the sweet spot, right? Because you're getting the follower want because it resonates with them, but you're getting wider interest from a larger amount of people. And so that's a concept I think and talk about a lot, in that like how do you create things that both professionals can gain value out of, but average people can find interesting. Like that's a sweet spot for content that like really resonates.
Yeah. Where do you come up with a lot of your content ideas and seek your inspiration?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm always working on it now, right? So I've made a video a day roughly for, so, I mean, I'm 700 videos in or something like that. It's something crazy. And so now it's like a constant, I keep notes in Notion of just like anything that comes up in conversation. Like even if we have this conversation, if I think of one or two things, or I've said one or two things where I'm like, man, that might be interesting for a video at some point. I just have a long, long list. Um, and what's interesting is like I sign up for a lot of conversations. You always have that like, oh, someone get coffee with me, someone do 15, everyone wants to get 15 minutes, whatever it is. Like for really interesting people, and especially now that I know so many people online and I can basically get anyone to respond to a DM, like I'm always just trying to have interesting conversations, whether it's just, in DMs or in real life, and then just put those notes down. So I have this big running list. I think some of the best ones are really from group chats. So I have a group chat with the Brand Brothers, quote unquote, which is like me and these three other creators who have like a weekly live show we do, where we're always just sharing links back and forth. I have another great group chat that's on WhatsApp with some international people I've met. It's someone I met in Berlin, two people in Hong Kong, one person in, are all like younger designers who just want to understand what's going on in other people's regions. Like that one's amazing. It doesn't contribute to content as much, but it like shows me a lot about like global stuff. You can be like, oh, well, like is Veja, like, are people wearing golden goose in Hong Kong? Like you can like kind of understand what's happening. And I think so like the combination of the conversations and group chats is like really probably the primary. It's not like I used to have a Feedly with all the news in my niche and stuff, but like now it's really kind of like this interpersonal communication. And then talking out those ideas with like other smart people, because you begin to kind of hone in on what's someone interested in, what's resonating. Oh, here's another point of view. And you kind of got to flesh those out into content.
What does your content process look like? I'm really curious, from ideation to pressing publish.
Yeah, I mean, so pretty straightforward. So like I keep that list, and I try to add bullets. So during the week, I'm adding to the list and I'm adding bullet points. So whenever I'm kind of like killing time or I need to, something to work on, I will basically go to that list and I will try to make sure I have a hook. So like basically your intro part of it, like something funny or interesting that gets people, excited. I try to have like 2 to 3 points. Like here's points I want to get across or things people should learn. I try to have an example, and I try to have something extra, whether that's like a joke or some connecting point or like some through line or some tie back to something else that's happening. And basically, if I get all those bullets where I have the hook, I have the points I want to make, I have the example, and I have the extra, like then I have a script essentially. And so like it's really easy to go from those bullets to a recorded video. And what I'll do is I'll make a graphic for every video. And so either that means I'll go into Canva and I will select 9 by 16 and I will grab images and put them on there or screenshot images from the web. So I have a bunch of 9 by 16 graphics and I'll talk one point over one graphic. Or if I'm just recording a straight video, I will get a bunch of graphics just in a little folder on my phone that I can then like layer over it. But then, yeah, I record it in CapCut, put the captions on. Sometimes now I'll send it. I have other editors that help, but mostly I'm still doing it. Yeah, and then we put it out. But sometimes when 3 or 4 videos ahead, like right now, I don't have anything I need to record until Sunday, and then sometimes I'm just doing it every day because I'm behind. But yeah, it's a grind.
Yeah, how often are you posting? You mentioned once a day. Is that pretty typical?
Yeah, every day. So I'd say I'm doing 6 probably a week of short form and then 1 to 2 long form. So I'm on YouTube every Sunday. I've been trying to do every Sunday and every Wednesday. I missed today. And so like maybe I'll get one out tomorrow, but we'll see. But that's kind of like the minimum is I want to make sure I have 6 videos on short form and like I give myself permission to take a day off just so it's not like crazy. And then 1 on long form and anything extra I do, great. If I could be doing 10, 12 videos a week, that would be amazing. And making sure I'm doing 2 long form. It's just, even with infinite time, like it used to be I was doing this and I had a CMO job and all my other businesses. And now I'm more focused on this. But even with infinite time, it's just hard to knock that much content out.
Yeah, what do you recommend typically in terms of posting frequency that creators should really aspire to if they want to see that growth?
Yeah, well, I think when you start off, I think it's really hard for people not to stay consistent if they don't go every day. If it's not like a habit where you're every day or 5 times a week, like every weekday, I find that most creators just don't actually do it. They will just, whether it's 3 weeks in or 10 weeks in, they just fall off. But if it's like a habit where every day you're working on it and you're publishing every day and you have to do it, those are the people that succeed. But then once you've established that habit, like now I feel like if I want to move to higher production content and I posted 3 times a week, it could probably be just as impactful. I'd grow just as fast, have just as many deals, et cetera. It really comes down to the kind of content and the production quality that you like to create. But I do think like getting in that daily rhythm is like super important for people and also just shows you with a time constraint that like you don't have to make these masterpieces. You need to get good at the way people consume content on the internet, which is lots of these little ideas and narratives all strung together.
Yeah, I'm curious how creating content and being this consistent and seeing the growth you've seen, how has that impacted your career so far?
Like shockingly so. Like almost bizarrely so, right? So like I remember like there's a couple moments like right. I got my first brand deal. It was Timberland boots, and it was $1,500. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. But like I wasn't like expecting it or expecting it to be like a household brand. So I was like, okay, cool. Like monetarily, this would be interesting. But really, what it impacted me is I was working at CMO at a CPG company or consumer electronics company, sorry, and we sold a lot of retail, Costco, Walmart, Target, like Dick's Sporting Goods, like all these different places. And I started to get in meetings with these big retail chains, and it would be like they'd have like 5 more people in the meeting than should be there because people just wanted to like meet me. Or it would change the dynamic when we're talking about like how a launch campaign was going to go because it's like, hey, okay, well that guy, we're gonna listen to him because he has the social media following. And I was like, okay, all automatically, it's like you're no longer arguing about whether you're making the right marketing decision because it's like, cool, does anyone else have like 500,000 followers here or has done this for X brands? Like, no. And it's not just like I can't. It's not like some like, oh, we did it for this brand or whatever. It's like, no, 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 like I do it. And that was interesting. And then it's also just like it just gives you that much more credibility in all these combos. And then now it's like it's almost bizarre now, is I feel like there's creators in different niches, and then there's what I call like the economy of ideas, which is like creators who like don't like read the news or like they don't niche down specifically, but really they're just interested in spreading ideas. There's probably like 5 or 6 of them that are like really large, of which I'm one of them. Where it's like there's a lot of people out there in the world that really, especially CEOs and CMOs and people, entrepreneurs who really value that kind of like the idea related conversation and understanding where things are going, and being in those conversations and being able to leverage like exchange favors with people who are interested in that is like allows me to do just much more business and move in a different way than I ever would have gotten to just like in my standard career path. It's pretty bizarre.
What does the kind of Oren pie chart of monetization look like right now in terms of your business adventures?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So basically, I'm a partner in two different agencies. One is a product development agency, which I don't take really any cash out of, but it builds a pretty big value. It's pretty large, has about 40 people in it. And then I'm a partner in like a more centered marketing agency where we do a bunch of, the work that you'd expect that I'm also not super hands-on with. I'm more just a lead funnel for. So, so those businesses are like owned and there's like a small amount of revenue coming in from them. And then other than that, it is a combo of like businesses that I'm a partner in that are e-com businesses, of which now we have three going on four, of which two are in fashion, one is in consumer packaged goods. There's a new one launching, and that's I'd say about half the revenue is like we actually have like cash flowing e-commerce businesses, and then it's getting pretty equal now with brand deals, and brand deals is feast or famine, right? Some months it's 100 grand, some months it's 10 grand, and that's kind of how it is. I don't ever want to rely on that. That's more of like upside, and I have been personally my goal for that has always been don't ever live off that money. That money all just goes into like starting businesses or doing things. And actually, these businesses I just mentioned like are primarily funded by my brand deals in terms of like how they got started. And then we have Cut 30 that I know you've been in, which is a pretty that's probably about a quarter of like income now is like stuff like that. And I have our email newsletter that we have that's just like a contributor. It's just like a solid business, like 5-figure business every month from the various work that comes from that. And so it's a lot of different things, which kind of really appeals to me as a creator, right? Because I live below the means of what those all add up to, because otherwise you'll kind of be losing your mind all the time. But I know that like if one thing goes down, right, I can no longer get brand deals for whatever reason, or email sponsors stop coming, or no one signs up for the cohort anymore. There's still all these other businesses there. And I know a lot of people say to zone in on like one thing, right, and kind of build that. And I'm sure if I did that, I'd probably make more money doing one thing really well. But I feel like for like the creative brain and like the ADHD brain, there's really, to me at least, like nothing better than the fact that I can just bounce between this stuff all day and be like, okay, I'm gonna get really into this for 90 minutes, and then all right, here's the next one is like kind of my ideal life. And so like, I really enjoy what that looks like. And now I'm just really thinking about how I layer on more people that are not at these individual businesses, but are like my people to like make sure that that's impactful.
Yeah, I'm the same way actually. I like having different things going on as well. I'm curious what the modern startup launch looks like now on social media, especially when you're building an
Yeah.
e-commerce brand.
Yeah. And so like I'm in the middle of this right now. But it's like the way I look at it is you basically if you can't build an audience yourself, I would, right? It is now one of the biggest things that I take appreciation for of having like the following I have now is that I can just continually get initial attention to any business I launch forever. And it may not be like game changing for it, but it can at least get a couple 100,000 eyeballs there a couple times, right? And that's a start. So basically building a personal brand of some kind you can use to launch things, I think is a great place to start. If you don't want to do that, then curating something where basically starting some accounts in your niche where you're like a creator's talking through the news or you're sharing archival stuff or whatever it is to kind of build up like some audience there, or ideally both, which is kind of what I'm doing with my latest brand where I did a lot based on me, but I also put out like some content, some reels and some things that are more about like curating like a lifestyle. And then you kind of build up that audience, and then you basically document either you document the process or you share what's coming in a way that like builds up anticipation, draws many people onto like a launch list or an initial community as you can there, and then really work with them, right? Like I'm working on something now for all like the first 100 people that supported this new brand we have are like all getting like some interesting stuff that I'm putting together specifically for them that they don't know about. It's the first time I've mentioned it is on here. And like, but like, I've emailed everyone who's ordered the first 200 orders one to one. And like, and they're all like, is this automatic? Now it's me on the other end. Like there's a community there. Like, and then you go launch it, and launching is like very social media focused, right? Where it's really a factor of how much energy and resources do you have? Because if you have content that resonates, and there's a lot of like, especially software apps and e-commerce brands now who kind of out the gate have some good content formats. Like you could have 4 or 5 creators or 4 or 5 accounts or 50 TikTok shop affiliates or like a bunch of these things working to create content on it. But like, you build your initial small community that's tight, you do a launch that brings more in, and you like hammer that organic content, take all the results of that organic content and those stats to help you leverage retail, which is a huge one. I worked on this brand called Chlorophyll Water a couple of years ago where we had this massive TikTok launch that the founder orchestrated, and I did some like SEO and support on, and he took all that interest and search volume and went to retail and crushed it because retailers were like, yeah, we want to take advantage of like this movement that's happening that you're creating. And I feel like that's the cycle now for e-commerce founders. And I love it because it's lean, right? Like you can do that with 2 or 3 people. It does not need to be these big teams. I think that's the future is these like a creator, two or three, operational folks can create brands that are in the single digit millions before they have to really think about scaling from there.
What would a social strategy look like for a team of that nature? Like, how much of the content is product focused versus how much is more lifestyle? Like, how would you approach building that strategy?
Yeah, I'd say everything's a funnel. It's another kind of topic I hit on a lot, but like I think you have to have there's basically two paths, right? One is if you can find a viral format that allows you to talk about your product. And so good examples of that is like dupe.com has one where they have like a female creator and she's kind of taught like she has the same format she uses again and again where it's like, I found this website, it allows me to get this thing that's this price for this thing that's this price. And that's an amazing content thing because it's viral all the time for a number of reasons. It's controversial, it's showing someone's savings, it's showing off interesting things. But it's also very product focused. And if you have something like that, you just repeat it until it dies and you can find another one. Most people don't have something like that. A good clothing brand example of this, there's two of them, is there's Der Shoots on TikTok and Nude Project, or clothing brands who just like basically have two or three creators that they work with that do skits and like trending video types and just are on it every single day. And that's another great one where those are product focused content, but it's more entertaining that they're able to hammer. But if you don't have those formats figured out, then I think it's about creating a funnel, right? Where like do and test, 2 to 3 like top of funnel lifestyle entertaining pieces of content that draw people in every week, and then do 2 or 3 more focused, like kind of developed educational, show people what you're working on and why videos in the middle, and then have 1 or 2 like buy my stuff, here's our favorite item, whatever, like at the bottom. I think that's the more, if you have to test your way into success, you do something like that. If you have formats that are actually performing that are about your product, then you just run them until until it stops.
Have you noticed a difference in short form video strategy between Instagram and TikTok? Or are you kind of repurposing your
Yeah.
content?
If you are blessed, you can repurpose across both ways. But I guess like it's different for a personality and a brand. But like for a personality, and if you deviate from it, your content doesn't work. And like that's one way to get as a creator. Or you're kind of like embrace this like holistic TikTok thing, which is like, hey, you can create funny skits and words over text with a single video and green screen and your lifestyle vlogs. And because you have a personality and you have a niche in the community, like all those things kind of work and you can create all these different content types. And so like TikTok is its own beast with its own that like works best in its own native format and native captions. That's really hard to like have something that works across them both, where it used to be very easy. Whereas Instagram is like a little more aesthetic focused now. Its edits are getting a little bit nicer and like has a very and doesn't appreciate as much of those like smaller, shorter skit formats. But what I like to call out to people is like for your first 100,000 followers, almost everything kind of works on both the networks and it's fine to go it. But if you really want to scale, you kind of have to be creating different content. Like once you get to a certain point, and then for brands, it's like it's way easier to grow and succeed on Instagram, at least in my opinion. And you kind of really have to think through those strategies. But like it changes like every month or two. Like really it's about staying on the cusp and watching other accounts and like having those conversations with 1 or 2 other smart people. Like that's what really helps people succeed, is thinking critically about it. And then if you see something that's succeeding, like testing a version of it, like immediately, like don't wait.
Why do you think it's easier to grow on Instagram right now?
I think, and there's obviously going to be exceptions to every rule, but I think for brands in particular, it's easier to grow on Instagram just because it's a more straightforward. Like if you make a good video about your product that looks really nice, that's well put together, is naturally interacted with those formats. Whereas TikTok is just weirder, right? People want like there has its own, memetics and like its own visuals and things like that like are help things be conducive to success. And if you're not native to that, you have a really hard time putting together. And if you are native to that, then you'll do just fine.
I'm curious if you could offer some advice for crafting like that personal brand. Obviously when you are building a brand, you're developing a visual identity and look and feel. And how does that, if you are a creator, how should that look on the creator channels versus the brand channels? And how do you develop consistency there?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of like thinking about things like in your presentation and what works. But I think I wouldn't get too caught up in it. I think really it's about like how do you present yourself is probably more important than the consistency of your presentation. So for instance, like a conversation I often have with creators is like, hey, like especially with older folks, like I'm older than I look. I'm 39. I have a lot of conversation with other like 35 to 45-year-old creators who like can't get their stuff to hit. And I'm like, yeah, it's because you kind of like look schlubby, like straight up. Like think about how you'd want someone to be presented who's giving you good information. Like, like is what you're wearing interesting? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Like do you look good? And that doesn't mean you have to be, ripped or skinny or whatever. It just means like you have to like have that like a little bit of aura, right? And I think that that matters more than like a brand consistency is like being friendly and like fun and approachable and interesting and like looking good in your own way and looking unique in your own way. I think is something that really helps develop people because visuals and stuff shift. Like, yeah, you can brand your captions, you can have similar backgrounds or styles or similar video edits, and that helps like over time, but it also dulls over time, right? And people will get used to seeing the same stuff like all the time and kind of swipe away. And so I feel like it's almost good to spice it up and keep things moving as a creator, but just always be like intentional about how you're presenting yourself and that you're coming across like positive and that people want to see you in their feeds. Another conversation I have a lot with creators who succeed with negative content, where I'm like, I've done some negative videos, they've been successful, but like if you get known for that, people are eventually going to want to alleviate that energy and it's going to attract the wrong audience. And like positivity and like smiling in your content just goes so much farther.
In terms of what is working for you, you mentioned kind of expanding to YouTube and doing long form video as well. And I feel like I looked at your channel and that's, maybe 6 months of long form content. I'm curious what made you want to expand into long form and on YouTube.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a deeper connection there that you can establish with longer content. Is one like, well, first, I think like I mentioned before on the income sources, I want to be diversified, right? If I have, especially now, when I started making the jump from, I'm also, working as an executive full time, it was like, if any of these go down, I want other ones to be around. So that was kind of the first objective. But then the second was like, once I actually started it, I was like, oh, well, for what I do, it's actually really hard to like discuss a nuanced thing about like creative direction for a brand in 90 seconds. And I'm always cramming it in and speaking fast through it when you can slow down and have that same conversation in 15 minutes and people like it. And then what I noticed is like the first couple videos I did, I had kids, and I say kids like specifically because it was like 23 to 27-year-olds that are like in my fan base, quote unquote, who are like sending me pictures of me on their televisions. And I'm like, oh, like, and that was like an opening for me where I'm like, oh, like they consume, this is like TV for this generation, right? They consume YouTube like that. When they sit down to go eat lunch or whatever, it's not like they put on Friends or they put on the TV or whatever, they put on YouTube. And I was like, this is amazing. Like that's that's like a level of connection I would prefer to have. I don't want you to go be scrolling and just come across me. I want like every Sunday at 10 a.m. when I publish, I want you to be like, I got to check out what Oren published today, the way I check out Game of Thrones if I'm interested in marketing. Like that was very exciting. And so I really leaned into that idea where I was like, hey, I want you to tune in on Sundays. I want you to be able to go into the week with like a new idea for your brand or a new exercise for you as a creative. And I feel like that's been a really cool format. And that's also inspired a lot of the new things I'm trying. So I'm doing like a more experimental ones on Wednesdays, but even we're doing live streams on Fridays. And it's just like, yeah, like I want it to be like appointment viewing. Like that's a really interesting idea that you can't achieve on the other networks.
What has your experience been like so far growing on YouTube?
Great. It started slow. Like basically it was like it was like took 18 videos to get to 5,000 or whatever. And then now I've gotten 8,000 subs in the last like, 5 videos or something like that. And so like my experience has really just been, you have to make really, it has to be like, when you're making stuff that's just like kind of typical or like attention grabbing or like very educational, it's like that goes one way or another. When you're like discussing ideas and are passionate about them, that actually goes really well. And then just people are just much more engaged. I definitely think that a YouTube subscriber is worth a lot more from a like resonance perspective than an Instagram or a TikTok subscriber. But I think they all work in concert, right? Like the general idea for me is I'm like, I want you to have quick glimpses of this. If you consume on here, you can dive a little deeper over there. And I'm really excited in like what this future of like episodic content looks like, right? Like I think what's really interesting to me about younger generations, especially Gen Alpha, Gen Z, is they consume entertainment content and value content right next to each other. So versus like when I grew up consuming TV, it would just be purely entertainment. And there was really no value content. Like maybe you look something up on YouTube, like how do I do this in Illustrator or whatever. But now it's like they'll just as easily see like like a prank video, and then they'll swipe and they'll be getting information that can help them at their job. And they're also looking at television stuff like that. And I think that's like such a dramatic shift in the ability to like have resonance with people when it's like, hey, guess what? All that energy that used to go into reality TV and sports and sitcoms is now like split between educational value content and that entertainment. And like there's only a certain amount of people that are actually going after that prize. I think I'm early on that, but like that is going to be like, that's an absolutely massive like sea change in how people consume. And that's really interesting to me. And it's happening on YouTube.
What's kind of your long-term vision for your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so I really want to be a resource. Like I've taken resonance with the fact that it is mostly younger people on there versus I get a lot of older folks on Instagram, like established creative professionals on there. And so really my goal is like I just want to have like a complete blueprint for how you can, how those people can avoid a lot of what I dealt with in my career and like not understanding what to do or how to navigate it and like make the most of either like having a rewarding creative life and then like being able to go launch their own projects and brands and do kind of interesting things. Like I really want to have a channel that is the blueprint. Like that's part one. And then part two, and what I'm working on with the Brand Brothers live stream thing we have that, that may be the final vehicle, it might not, but like I kind of want to look at it to what I talked about before, where it's like for value, I want to be the sports center for like branding or marketing. Like that's our goal there. Like the way people tune in to talk about sports, that's pretty much useless to you. That's pure entertainment. That has no real value to anybody that's watching it. No offense to the sports community. But if you go there and you want to get that response to something that's really interesting to you professionally and you can make it entertaining, which branding has a way to do and very few other niches don't. I was like, I'd love to be that, like build that on YouTube, like in hand with this educational presence. Like that's a very interesting thing for me. And be able to like document the brands I build and like be able to kind of share and sell things along the way. So I don't have to necessarily rely on advertisers to support that. It's really interesting.
I love the variety of content you have on YouTube. Like I like the just straight up kind of talking head educational style and then also the content where we're following you and you're going to a factory or whatever and we're actually following you in your day-to-day building. Um I'm curious how you're using YouTube and content like that where you are dropping brands you're working on and projects and are you seeing like a drive to newsletter subscriptions or customers from YouTube content?
Honestly, on YouTube, I am winging it and testing. Like so everything. The reason there's so much types of styles on there is I still have no idea what works. Of the basically, I have like 4 videos that have done pretty well, and it's like I have I still couldn't tell you why or how to reproduce it, and so I'm just literally in the method of figuring that out. I've seen some sales from YouTube shopping, which I think is interesting. Not like a ton, but like one video had like 4, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've like filed that away in the back of my mind as a future thing, which is just like when you link your Shopify store to YouTube. But like, yeah, so I haven't seen like any huge dramatic results like for YouTube, right? Like I haven't gotten any sponsors or made any money or, pieced anything together there that's like particularly interesting. But like I see the future of where that goes, right? I think getting an overall sponsor for my channel, like having a company come in and I run all my docs out of it or do whatever is probably higher value for them over time than doing individual brand deals with me on short form, which is interesting. But yeah, right now I'm still figuring it out and just trying to see what formats people like. And then kind of add monetization onto it later, which is again one of the luxuries you get to be able to do that if you're either doing it while you already have a job or you're doing it while you have other things that bring in revenue.
Yeah, something that has stood out to me was this bag you're working on for I think it's Valuable Studios, right? And you've been teasing
Yeah.
the creation of that bag. I'm curious, like when you start teasing a new product that's coming soon, what is the best way you're finding to drive like that waiting list and that interest?
Yeah, and so this is something I've been experimenting with a lot. And I think I'm sharing the process of it a lot. And I think sharing just the kind of the behind the scenes or getting people involved, like didn't directly drive subscribers or waitlist. It drove people getting involved in the process. And so if I looked at some of those videos from a pure metrics perspective, they actually get a ton of engagement. A lot of people are trying to get involved in the process of creating, which I think is amazing, but they don't drive like a lot of waitlist or anything. But I think that's okay because then what I've seen is like the way I'm structuring it is like I share all that stuff and then I have like a moment. And I just did it for this shoe bag like yesterday, where it's like, all right, now like here's the sketch, and now here's the final thing that I'm about to sell. And now here's a wait list. And that drove a ton of subscribers. And so I think it's one of those like follow the journey, follow the journey, follow the journey. Okay, now there's a moment, and then activate that as hard as you can. Seems to be the right thing. But like I'll fully admit that like I am figuring that out for this, like as we talk. And then I'm going to continue following that up with like, all right, now let's tell that whole story from I got the community involved. We had these designs, we had these sketches, we went to this, we went to this. Now it's live. Here's why I think it's a great product and you should buy it. And like, maybe that's the moment. But I think it's all about just like having, like continuing to test more and more of these moments and see what it is. The hardest part for me about this is I realize like I have a brand. I'm leveraging my creator status and my influence to sell that brand, but it's also not for all of my audience, right? Like a lot of it is like, it's 80% men, 20% women clothes. It's like and it's very has a very visual vibe that is probably only a subsection of my audience will vibe with. So how do I still make it valuable and interesting for them while not pounding them over the head with buy this thing they're not interested in? And so that's a something I'm 100% aware of and like making sure to work around. And it means that the goals are different than if you were purely building an audience to sell something. Because at the end of the day, this is just one of many brands that I will have through this audience. So I want to be a careful steward of it, make sure I'm always driving value in every conversation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like just there's no one answer and you just test a lot of different things. That makes a lot of sense.
I would say the biggest thing is to ask, right? Like at some point when you develop things, you have to be like, get on this wait list or do this thing, or like, here's what I'd like you to have. I think that's what most brands don't do enough is like they won't prep people why they should ask or they won't actually make the ask. And I think you kind of have to do both.
Yeah. Where does your newsletter Hyper fit into your kind of, creator business ecosystem in terms of driving any particular revenue goals that you have?
Yeah, a bunch. So that's the most consistent of the businesses we have. It's like a 5 figure a month business. It's a 6 figure a year business, and it is a like, and there's costs and things associated with it. And I do it with another creator, and there's a lot that like happens, to work with that. But like that was one where I look at newsletters as like one you can have many of. Like it started off as Oren's newsletter basically, and then I moved it to Hyper and branded it and brought another creator into it because I wanted it to be bigger than me. I wanted it to be like this is a newsletter for brand strategy and creative direction because there's marketing newsletters, there's all this other stuff, but they're most of them are generic. Most of them are personality driven. And I was like, I just want to be the best resource possible for brand strategy and creative direction. That is one of like three main topics I talk about on my content. I use that as a call to action when I talk about those things. And it gives me the ability to talk about it in longer form. It's great for sponsors because I can do something like, hey, hear me talk about a concept. Here's a brand that does the concept. If you want to really understand it, here's a newsletter. And then I can be like, here's the 16 steps you do to actually use this thing I just talked about, sponsored by Y. So like that's good. Yeah, and I just feel like that will be around forever. That's the nice part, right? No social media reach. We'll have 30,000 subscribers that are on that list forever as long as we keep providing them value. And I think it's amazing. I'm looking at a second newsletter on a different topic coming up here in a month or two that I'm also partnering on. I don't like to do things just myself when possible, especially creative things. But yeah, I think if you have the ability to drive it, it's one of the most important things you can do as a creator, even if you only have 100 subscribers, because you can attack them for basically have that conversation for the rest of your life.
How are you building your sponsorship packages with all your different verticals of content that you're doing?
Yeah. And so like the newsletters, we have people that just go and get that specifically. And then other times it's either you're getting a video where you talk about something, and usually I'll be like, I'll do a video and and I'm going to talk about a thing, and you're also going to run an ad, and you can test that against your standard ads. So that's like option one is just newsletter. Option two is you do like a video and you run it as an ad. And option three is kind of like the whole thing where you can go across, LinkedIn and Twitter, and like we can go like the whole world. And then what really works and what I think I'm in the longest kind of relationships with, like what people have seen me do with SurveyMonkey and relationship I have with Black Crow and a few of these others is like longer term, where it's like, hey, let's tell this story over 10 or 15 pieces of content. I'm at the events, we're running things together where there's like, that's what I like more because it's like, then we're actually getting into it and you can answer questions versus a kind of just like an ad. None of these things are really ideal for, the creator economy is still figuring all this stuff out, right? Like none of these formats are amazing. None of this is kind of perfect. And so I don't have any better ideas necessarily yet, but I do feel like this is just so nascent in terms of how this stuff monetizes. It's hard to really understand. There's the ever like I'll get an offer for $50,000 next to an offer for $5,000 for the same thing from a brand of the size. No one has any idea how to price this stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild west. Hard to know how to structure everything for sure. Um, I'm curious, like, I think a question a lot of people would want to know, Oren, is how you balance your time to make the content you do and run all these business ventures.
Yeah, look, I mean, just I'm coming from like marketing exec world, right? Where and then president of a 200-person company world before that, where it's like every half hour of my day is blocked off always in thing by thing. And now I'm just transitioning from that being meetings to that being action. Like I have massive lists. I block time for every single thing of it. And I'm going, I'm working on that 12 hours a day. And that's fine. I enjoy that. And I think I between things and be able to do it, home a lot. I'm still around my family a lot. Like my son can come with me to factories and things like that, like dynamic and like he can be in the mix of how things come to life. But it's all in Notion. Like without Notion, my life would be in shambles. And it's just like everything is tasked, everything is assigned time, and I roll through it. Like we've got this hour here, and then I know the three things I have to do before like the end of the day. And the hardest part about it is like the creative thing. How do you come up with more ideas or stuff, and making sure you have time to kind of breathe in there. But yeah, I haven't burned out so far, so we'll see how it goes.
What would your biggest piece of advice be to aspiring creators who eventually want to launch their own brands?
Yeah, I think drive as much value as possible, right? Like people follow and resonate with creators that give them value, right? They don't want to follow if people are following you because you're cool. That's like maybe you can get a little bit of value out of it, but people really are like supportive sort of people like they give them back to it. And so I think like that value has to be first and foremost at the beginning of everything you're creating. That people are like, wow, like this person gives me more than I would have expected, and it seems to be at like a ridiculously low cost. And then those people will go out of their way to support you when you do have something, whether they like it or not. And I think that's like a big thing to lead with. And the other thing is to like really think about making things that your audience wants, right? And that's a big like I look at it like there's two types of content first businesses. One is like an attached business, which is basically what I have, where you're like, hey, I make content, and now I need to sell something, and maybe it resonates with some. And then the other side of that is businesses where like you're making content or art that is going to bring the people along with you, and that is harder. You have to start with a much bigger vision, and you have to like have something really powerful there. But like that's like obviously like a better way to do it if you have the resources, which most don't. We have to kind of acknowledge where you're at and really think through like how you're going to do it in a way that doesn't alienate folks. Just remember that again, your job isn't like people aren't there for you to sell them something; they're there to get value.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's a great way to end. I really appreciate this, Oren, and I got so much value from doing your Cut 30 video bootcamp, which I will link in the description for everyone to go check that out if you want to
Amazing.
learn. But yeah, this was awesome. Thank you for sharing all this awesome wisdom with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me and the interesting questions. And yeah, looking forward to connecting soon.